on here today, so it's great to see all of you as we have gathered this morning, or wherever you're zooming in from today, because it might be different time zones. It's great to see all of you as we gather this morning to join together hearing about DEIB. And let me just give you a little bit of background about this. So ICF Global has done this global initiative to focus on DEIB, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and belonging. And Petra and I, a couple months ago, had a chance to sit in on a Zoom meeting with some ICF Global leaders about this initiative. And we had the idea about doing a kickoff event this month, November. And so our president, Petra, will be doing a presentation in a few moments. And just so you know, this is a kickoff event. We're doing a few events this month. Next week, we're doing, on Tuesday, Bruce Hostetter is doing a topic on neurodivergence, which is going to be next Tuesday, November 15th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Next Thursday, we're going to have a presentation called Embracing Diversity in Your Coaching with Patricia, Patty Ann Lee, and that's next Thursday at 6 p.m. You'll see all that information in your emails that come from ICF Orange County. But just want to let you know that also next year, we're going to be focusing on some of these DEI topics throughout the year. And this is really our kickoff event to say, why does DEI matter? But also to say that this is a global initiative from ICF. So it's my honor to go ahead and introduce to you Petra Russell, whom I think most of you know. She's our great, fearless president here for ICF Orange County, and also a dear friend of mine I got to know this past year. And I just want to share some words about her and her little biography here. Petra has over 20 years of leadership experience working across industries and organizations of all sizes, ranging from the fastest growing to the world's most admired companies. She focuses on the importance of collaborating closely with people from diverse cultures and backgrounds as a strategic advantage in today's global marketplace. Consulting internationally since 2005, she has cultivated expertise in cross-cultural and generational training as part of leadership skills development that is focused on emotional connection, conversational intelligence, and building transformational relationships. Developed through firsthand knowledge and experience from working and living in Germany, the United States, Central America, and Asia, Petra is passionate about helping people effectively address barriers to personal and professional success, which inspired her to become a certified energy leader master practitioner, a triple certified executive coach, and an emotional connection trainer. Today's exploration and presentation was originally designed to engage chief HR officers and talent developers in international companies on how to start having conversations that matter around all things DEIB. Again, that's diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and to help them create psychologically safe spaces to reflect on challenges and biases we may subconsciously bring into the conversation when interacting with or advocating for underrepresented minorities in our workplaces and our communities. So again, it's my honor and privilege to introduce our president, Petra Russell, for this presentation on DEIJB.
Thank you so much, Daryl, for your kind words. I'm going to make this real quick and just add for transparency. I recently caught COVID on travels to Europe, and I'm still recovering my voice. So if at some point it sounds a little bit off, that would be the reason. But I'm thrilled to be here with all of you today. And I'm going to jump right in so that we can maximize our time here together. Please do use the chat feature with questions. I will try to address those as we move through the presentation and through the exercises. And if we need to, we may leave a few for the end of the presentation, but certainly make use of that chat feature. And with that, I will go ahead and share my screen with you guys and jump right into today's topic. Hold on. Is everybody seeing my screen right now? Okay, great. So I'm going to bring us up to speed a little bit, just to have a shared vocabulary and a little bit of a moment to focus in on what our topic is for today. Want to talk about, as Daryl mentioned, the aspect of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging specifically. And true diversity is obviously more than the aspects of a person that you can see. So it's the stories we tell, it's the communities we grew up in, and the ways we choose to express ourselves when we are most comfortable. Together today, I want to explore with you how our unconscious biases impact our ability to promote, foster, and coach around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and explore related challenges we all face at times, consciously or subconsciously. In other words, how can we as coaches, managers, or leaders, and we're all leaders, help create and role model behaviors that foster diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging in a psychologically safe space and environment? And as with almost everything, it starts with you. So that's where the focus will be for today. The following presentation, as Daryl mentioned kindly, has actually been put together for HR leaders and L&D leaders and organizations that I serve through Parish Partners. And we've delivered some of these over the past 18 months with always a super interest on my part to see where the discussion is going with each group. So I invite you all to be vulnerable today, knowing this is a safe space where we can genuinely discuss and hopefully encourage each other to remember and learn from sharing more about where we struggle sometimes in our conversations, or when we feel discouraged to fully participate out of fear that we might be saying something inappropriate or that the conversation may become judgmental. And with that thought, I'm gonna actually dive into our first breakout today. I want to really give you all a few minutes to reflect and get curious on a situation that you may have experienced in the past, either long ago or more recent, that really left you feel excluded or uninvited for some reason, known or unknown to you. It may have even been an instance where you were invited but still felt out of place, or simply like you didn't belong. And once you have identified the situation that shows up for you most strongly as an almost body memory, right? When we have these kinds of memories, sometimes we really get a sensation of what that felt like in the moment, and share what belief, assumption, or conclusion you may have held about yourself or others that have been true or somewhat true for you ever since. So I'm going to give you guys 8 minutes to just share what that situation may have been like for you. And again, what assumption, belief, or conclusion about yourself or others have been a takeaway ever since for you that you feel like is something you hold on to or is true for you today. And when you come back, please prepare to share maybe 1-2 insights with the group. Again, this is all about us learning and sharing. And with that, I hand it over to Michael real quick to set you up for your breakout.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Petra. So I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. You will get a 1-minute warning. So at 7 minutes, you'll get a 1-minute countdown. And then once that countdown counts down all the way, you'll be automatically placed into the room. And so you'll get a notice in a second, jump into your rooms and get started. And as Petra said, you know, as soon as you come up with that idea, that memory, share about the belief, the assumption, and the conclusions you made. So we'll let you get into your room. See you in about 8 minutes. And Sandra, you have to accept that invite into the room. And Kathy, I think you were logged on twice, or
We have Kathy still here, Michael? No?
Yeah, no, she's in. She's logged in twice.
Oh, okay. And then we got Wendy Green.
Wendy, you're with us right now, correct?
Yeah, she just joined the room.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I was on a phone call.
I'm gonna assign you to a room, okay, Wendy? So you're jumping into that room. I'm gonna put you into room 3. And you're
Okay.
and you want to, and Petra, do you want to quickly just give her the rundown of what she's doing?
Yeah, what we're sharing, Wendy, is a belief, an assumption, or conclusion that you have held about yourself or others from a situation that made you feel like unincluded, excluded, not invited, or for whatever reason uncomfortable.
Okay,
Okay, there you go. See you soon, Wendy. Thank you.
thank you.
And Wendy, did you get that? Okay, there you go. Okay. Got it. And then,
You
Lori,
counted the time clock, Michael, from the beginning, right? Yeah.
yeah, we're good. And then Lori, are you good? You want to hang with us, or did you want to jump into a room? What do you prefer?
Oh, mute.
I could go either way. Yeah, it's Kathy, is she dialed in because she
Yeah.
needs her phone because
She's
she
in.
can't hear? Or we
No,
go-
she's just she had technical problems she shared with me.
okay,
IT issues.
yeah,
So Lori, I'll throw you into a room just so you can see what's going on in there. It'd be good to get that
Okay.
feedback if that's cool with
Yeah,
you.
sure.
Okay.
absolutely, that'd be
I'll put
great.
you in room 4. All right.
Okay,
Yeah, it's interesting because last week I was doing a presentation for for the Lutherans, a coaching thing, and Zoom shut down. We had our bishop as our guest speaker, and we had I think 48 people were in attendance or registered. Only 17 showed up, and we're like, that was kind of embarrassing for us with having the bishop there. And then we found out that Zoom, I guess, crashed. So all the people who registered, we sent them the video so they could at least see it. But I felt really bad about that, but technology is technology. So yeah, I'm not sure if it was an issue all day long or not. It was last Thursday, which is why I wasn't able to be at the Clutterbuck event, because I was hosting that other event for that. And I was like, oh no, this is kind of embarrassing, because we're like, he met us a 1:45, and I'm like, we had like 47 people registered. It's going to be a great presentation. And then 11 o'clock, we let people in. It's like 17, really?
It happens. It happens.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I haven't had it with Zoom though. I had it with Google Meets, and I've had it with Microsoft Teams.
Well, and then what made it worse is that the person who set the meeting up was traveling in a plane, and so wasn't able to get emails saying, hey, I can't get in. And then we reached out to her colleague who's like, well, I can run to her desk and see if I can figure this out. And we're like, well, at 11:30, the thing's done in 30 minutes. Let's not worry about that. But yeah, so I mean, it all works out well. But that's, like we said about technology, those things happen. So and yeah, that's the first time, Peter, I've ever had that with Zoom. I've had it with other things, other platforms, but Zoom has been really
It's been really good
great.
for me, but
yeah.
I'm gonna
It's
disappear
reliable.
for a second. I just want to make sure Kathy has what she needs, and I'll come back to you guys. Okay.
Sure.
so I hope folks did the test, and I also hope they got the handout.
Yeah. We'll find out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that test was, well, I know you're going to talk about that later, but that test was something else.
Isn't it surprising? We
It
always
is.
think we know our stuff and we know ourselves, and then we do
Yeah.
some tests and we're like, wow, I was so
know.
surprised over my results. What did you find out?
I just found out, I mean, I just found out some things that were just surprising about myself as well. It's like, and I guess, I thought I knew myself pretty well. I try to be really open-minded and everything, but it's like, even like we said in your bio, we have these biases, intentionally or not, these subconscious things that come up. and everything.
I'm
And
not aware of it. That's the
yeah,
tricky part,
yeah.
right? And they do inform our decision making.
Yeah. And, made me think, because I was taking it when this whole thing with Kanye West came up about, anti-Semitism and,
Oh, I actually have that slide in here.
oh, do you? Okay. Yeah. And
Oh,
I'm thinking,
I thought
I'm
that's too
thinking,
good to
oh,
pass up in this conversation.
yeah. And I'm thinking, and then I heard some people saying, well, I'm not anti-Semitic. I think some, Jewish people, this or the other. I'm thinking, dude, that is anti-Semitic. It's like, do you not know that Semitic and Jew is like the same term and everything? And it's like, yeah, I mean, people are surprised about themselves. They don't, even like these really open-minded people. Sometimes, I deal with some of these people. I'm thinking, I don't say it to them. Sometimes it comes in coaching session. I'm thinking, did this person just say what I think he or she just said?
Michael, how?
All right, welcome back as you're coming back from your breakout rooms. Welcome back from your breakout rooms. I know that Petra's going to jump right in. Get ready to, someone's going to be ready to share. So whoever's ready to share, I think Petra's going to hit you up. So welcome back. And Petra, we'll hand it back over to you.
So how was this for everybody? And as Micah said, who would like to share? Michael and Daryl, if you guys help me identify or highlight who may be ready to share their experience. And again, we don't have to go into great detail about it, just kind of what stuck with you from that experience.
Yeah, and just come off come off mute or raise your hand, so we'll take you, you take yourself off mute. It just takes one brave soul.
I was gonna say, any brave soul.
Cindy, it looks like Cindy's the one I her reaching. So.
I've come off mute yeah, so that was a great discussion. Kathy and I, were sharing kind of some similar and yet different scenarios. And for me, it is around, being in a same-sex marriage, not having kids, and ending up in these scenarios, social scenarios, where people are asking, oh, do you have kids? And then kind of these awkward moments that ensue where you say, oh, no, I don't have kids. And it's not the answer that they're expecting. And the reaction that I personally have had at times, where I feel kind of like it's pointing out, hey, I'm not part of the mainstream. I'm not part of this particular part of the culture. Maybe feeling less than, left out, and having this sort of experience of an awkward moment. And how over time, my personal reaction has been to now, have some compensations where I talk about my nieces and nephews, which is along a similar vein. And Kathy said something really wonderful that I jotted down, which she said, it's about staying graceful, which I really loved. Because while it can also open a dialogue with somebody about, cultural differences, you can also do that in a very graceful way. And so that was a great takeaway for me.
Thank you so much. Excellent sharing and a great example. Just following your story, what pops up is we get into these conversations, and then we start trying to rescue the other person, and we're also trying to rescue ourselves, right? And that's when we become really awkward with self, and we become a little bit inauthentic even, right? So on the extension, that can sometimes even turn into what we know as people pleasing, right? Trying to come up with an answer that hopefully resonates the best. So again, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm gonna move us along, unless we have someone else that would love to share their finding from the breakout. I'm gonna give that a few more seconds. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to share something that I was talking to Tara, my person in the breakout, is that my earliest experiences when I was a small child, and I was adopted when I was 3, and I didn't know that I was different. I lived in Minnesota, and I was in maybe first grade, and for the very first time I experienced racism, and I didn't know what that was, and it made me feel like I didn't belong and I wasn't good enough. And that carried with me for, all of my life. And I guess that's what I just like to share is that racism, for an individual like myself, stays with you forever, and you see it, and you see things improving, and then you experience it maybe through a microaggression or through some inadvertent bias or something, and it just kind of repeats itself. And it's very I think very wonderful that we are doing things like diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, and it's becoming to the fore in terms of our society and our values. And we got to keep working on it. And I took some of the tests, and it's just very enlightening. So I just want to say thank you. I think this is really important, and I just wanted to share because as somebody that experienced it very young, it stays with you forever, even if you have things like this that are, becoming more mainstream and more valued in our society.
Absolutely. Thank you, Leanne. That was wonderful. Thank you for sharing that experience. And to your point, it stays with us, and we're inadvertently seeking more proof for what we believe to be true in that situation. So we always have to work on challenging ourselves to find proof somewhere else, right on the other end of the spectrum, to mediate that and have an opportunity to put a different lens on that supports us better in those situations. Thank you again for both of you, Cindy and Leanne, for sharing that. I'm going to move us quickly to some terms I want us to all be familiar with in terms of how we want to use this today. So diversity really in my world typically is the who and the what of all the characteristics of who we are. And I think it always makes sense for all of us to take a moment sometimes and really create or craft a little statement about that, right? Who am I? What am I? How do I show up? And then the inclusion part really for today's conversation is the how, right? How we create an engaged environment for all, and what do we contribute to make it so? How do we contribute to make that space feel not judgmental and open for different, I'm going to go with diversity of thought here. Equity is, of course, creating fairness by providing everyone with access to resources, treatment, and support with consideration to different needs that are to thrive. So what I'm going to do here real quick is I'm going to move to this slide here for a second, because we sometimes get that confused, right? Equity and equality is not the same. And when we think about a cafeteria lunch, that's not the burger that we have here on the left side, right? That's depending on where you are with your nutrition, can be a million different things. So I always want to make sure we don't get those two things mixed up. What works for one person may be modified to meet the same need for someone else. And then last but not least, belonging and that feeling of being taken in and accepted as part of a group, which is something that essentially we all strive and look for. And that's something that can be painful if we experience the opposite. So wanted to just create that for us. I'm moving on to a little bit of a reflection here for all of us. And this was actually a handout that you may have gotten with one of our last announcement and reminders for today's presentation. If not, I'll keep this up for you. As we move through the next 4 slides, I want you to be particularly paying attention to the first column. So what we're doing today is, for the most part, the no, and the question around what comes up for you when you look at the next 4 pictures. And I'm going to give us 2 minutes per slide. So we're not going to go into the breakout. I think this is easy to do. We'll just stay together here in the big room. And I'm going to go through 4 different situations and invite you to, without explaining the environment or explaining the situation, just pay real close attention to some of the thoughts that pop up for you as you imagine walking into this group or into the scene and join this particular group of people. So again, we're staying with the first column, the no, given your identity and your lived experience, what might you be aware of in this particular setting? And name some of the emotions that come up for you. Michael, I'm going to help you keep time for us. And I'm going to start with the first slide. And again, we'll do 2 minutes each slide.
And Petra, you'd like them to name what they see in the chat? Is that what you'd like?
Just take some notes. Yeah, if you don't have the handout handy, we can just take some notes somewhere. Again, this is just really to share afterwards what came up in different situations.
You want 2 minutes per slide, Petra? Is that what you wanted?
I think that would give us about sufficient time. Yeah, we can.
Okay, so that's 2 minutes for this
Everybody,
one.
2 minutes then. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide.
Okay, Petra, next one.
Next slide.
Okay, we're ready for the next one.
And next slide.
Petra, there were 4 slides total, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
At the fourth slide.
Okay, you have about 30 seconds left.
Okay.
All right, there you go. That's time.
So as we wrap this one up, I again encourage anybody to share a little bit from their perspective what showed up for them. Again, there's no right or wrong here. And again, judgment free. Just curious what showed up for you.
I'll say something.
Yep.
Super interesting. I had a range of emotions, and I definitely have some unresolved opinions about law enforcement. And I have some unresolved opinions about the phrase "White Lives Matter," because I had very different reactions to those 2 photos than I did to the other 2 photos.
Could you describe just a tad bit or name a few emotions on this side versus the other side that came up?
Yeah, so the things that came up for me with the first picture with the group of people in the room and with the third picture, which was all the women at the beach, were things like curiosity, things that were very open, things that felt very sort of warm and fuzzy. But those were not the emotions I experienced when I saw the police officers, and not the emotions I experienced with the last one. There was some hostility type attitudes coming up for me with the law enforcement picture and with the White Lives Matter picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, like with the officers, the one looking right at the camera, I'm enraged just looking at him, because he has kind of a smirk on his face. Like, I have this story about like what his expression means, right? So I definitely have some unresolved things going on about law enforcement right now. And I come from a law enforcement family, by the way, so it's a complicated process for me.
Again, I love that you share this so freely. There is nothing right or wrong here, right? We all have a different mixed bag of lived experiences, and those definitely show up when we see certain things, right? And this is really all about building more awareness around what that actually is, right? That triggers us, or that actually lands on a raw spot for us. So thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else that had an observation while going through those 4 images?
I can share. I found that sometimes I was going through different emotions, like a progression of emotions. So So like, and the very first picture, I guess I'll pick that one because to me, there was a lot going on in that picture that I didn't really digest right away. So my initial reaction was like, that's a lot of people in a small space, you know, and then it kind of went to a little more curiosity, like, who are these people? And there are a lot of people who seem really different from each other. And what are all those words on the wall? And like, and then it looks like they're having meaningful conversation. So it's interesting. So it went from kind of this like shock to curiosity and interest and, you know, thinking, oh, I could probably have meaningful conversations with those people too. So it was kind of interesting progression of.
Thank you, Sharon. So this is an interesting one. And I was not trying to steer you guys into building a story around the actual image, right? So I didn't give you guys too much context or any context, because that immediately kind of stimulates the brain to then sort through what you see, right? So I wanted this to be really impression-based. And the less we know, sometimes the more insight we actually gain from something. So I hope you guys appreciated the lack of context here. I'll be happy to share, of course, the sources of these pictures and where they were taken if that's of interest. So feel free to put that in the chat if you have a specific question. But yeah, I think this is definitely a good example of different situations that cause us to really stop, pause, and kind of see what's coming up for me. And of course, what we're looking at too is, what if that comes up in a coaching session, right? What if someone has that kind of an opinion in a coaching session? What do you do with that, right? How do you stay curious? How do you filter through the information in a non-judgmental way and actually really do your part in this coaching conversation? And what I wanted us to take away here is, and again, please refer to your handout for the last two paragraphs here, but know yourself is the one that we just worked through, which is really tune in to be more aware of your own emotions, right? And reactions. And again, this is something we can do as an ongoing exercise. This is not a one-time event, right? This is really noticing our reactions and how they're influenced by unjust norms and past experiences. Stay curiously and stay open to your own feelings as a source of insight. So again, it does not help to shuffle those things under the rug, to censor or edit and say, I shouldn't feel this, I shouldn't think this, and this is probably not appropriate. You should really be okay letting that bubble up and notice what's bubbling up, right, without labeling it right away. And with that awareness, we can then choose or assess, which is when your reactions are not equitable and life-sustaining. And at this moment, it's kind of like the next step here, shifting from unconscious reaction to intentional response that is aligned with your core values. And again, it's not the judgment of right or wrong. It's more, who am I authentically, right? And where do I need to stay more curious and learn or hear things, or actually show interest in hearing things that I don't already know. So this is really where these conversations become interesting and they're not becoming judgmental. Give yourself is really the connect beyond yourself to get out of an isolated or ego-based perspective. So this is when we increase empathy for the other person and remind ourselves that all of us show up the best way we know how to in this moment, right? So some of us have more self-awareness, some of us have more emotional intelligence, and some have a lot less to work with yet, right? Have maybe a little bit longer to go to reach up where you are or catch up where you are. But to really have empathy for that and feel that we're in this together. So instead of creating these divides, right, this person is on the wrong side of the topic and I'm on the right side of the topic, really step forward with a purpose of understanding first, where is this person coming from and what are some of these maybe lived experiences look like? What do they actually, where do they come from? What's informing the way this person is commenting or showing up in the situation. And again, it takes a lot to control what pops up on our end, right? And regulate that, to keep that space open and make it safe for the other person to actually feel comfortable coming forward with where they are with this and where their reflection may start. Any questions to this thus far?
Petra, you have one in the chat from Tara, and
Yeah.
she's asking, how do you suggest getting past feeling quote unquote shame for any bias or judgment?
So shame is a super interesting emotion in all of this, because shame comes oftentimes from experiences that we've made way back when, right? The first time we ever felt shame come up is typically when we were maybe a kid, right? And we did something wrong, and out of a sudden the whole world started looking at us going like, oh, finger point. And we felt kind of exposed, right, with something that apparently we didn't do right. Shame is also a little bit of that comparison that we do, right? When we look at things and we assume a lot, right? We assume where this person's coming from versus maybe where we're coming from. We oftentimes really sum people up optically, visually, right? We get very much aware of even economically differences or differences in how somebody dresses, shows up. So when we feel uncomfortable in a situation, the best thing to always do with these kinds of situations is to acknowledge where we are. The moment we try to be someone other than who we are in that moment is when we come across inauthentic. And we all know what that looks like, right? When someone else does it. So always remind yourself, the best you can do is really step into the courage to really say, okay, this is where I'm at with this, right? And however you want to now get into the curiosity of getting more information is really by acknowledging this is a new situation for me, but I'm really intrigued to find out more. Help me to understand, right? Open the conversation and really open it up to learn more rather than trying to fill in. We get so fast about bridging that silence or bridging that pause with some chit chat that really is oftentimes not really helping or supporting us in that moment. It's really just kind of our uncomfortable scenario that we're experiencing in our body in that moment. So really the best way to address these kinds of discomfort or uncomfortable situations is by really accepting that moment that we're in at this moment and really accepting, I'm here with this, help me understand what's going on better, and really including the other person in that exploration. Does that answer the question a little bit?
Tara's on. Oh, yes. She said, yes. Thank you very much.
We can circle back, and meanwhile, I'm going to move on. What I would like to get at next is really our little prerequisite that we had for this session today, which is the implicit association test. So with that, I want to follow up and just hope that some of you had a chance to check in into this particular link prior to the session today. The idea of project implicit or implicit association test is to find new ways of understanding attitudes, stereotypes, and other hidden biases that influence our perception and judgment and action. And the tests, and there are, as you have seen, I think 14 categories to choose from, measure attitudes and beliefs that people may be unwilling or unable to report. The tests may have been especially interesting if it shows that you have an implicit attitude that you did not know about. And I can only say this for myself. I certainly found out one or the other thing that I would have never guessed without going through the test. I want to also say that this measures implicit or unconscious association. It does not measure bias in behavior, so there's a difference. It's also not perfect like any tool, So it's helpful to start getting into some more deeper reflection or some valuable and meaningful conversations. It's not the last telltale all say all. It's also really, again, a point to raise awareness with this, not to issue a verdict. And I hope that's kind of how you guys played with this. So it wasn't meant to sum you up or create a short summary of where you have blind spots. It was really more to give you an idea of what we carry around and really don't know, but will inform oftentimes our decisions. And I can speak for myself here. I discovered that I have a preference apparently for man in a career versus a woman in a career. And so in a household that I grew up where both my parents were working, my dad in research, my mom in finance, apparently I still carry around a subconscious preference for men being a breadwinner and women may have a career or not, doesn't really matter. which is really, I can't imagine where that's coming from, but it is actually, it actually came out. So I invite you to share here a little bit maybe of some of the things that came out while you were going through this, and some of the things that may be part of what you bring into the room when you have a conversation or a coaching session. As per the insight, of course, of this little exercise. Anybody had an interesting finding?
There's if you look, Petra, do you have the chat open? Can you see the
I don't have it open, no.
Okay, so Genevieve shared, I associate men to science and women to the arts.
And was that a revelation for you? Was that something that you kind of had a leaning towards already, or something that really caught you off guard? Just curious.
It didn't catch me off guard, but it was interesting to see it in a written format, and that it was part of an assessment, and that was the results. And my team is primarily women, and we're a very creative group. We're growth and development here at the company I work for. So yeah, I think more the step by step I associate with men, where women are more the creative force. We speak about all the things. So that was interesting to see as a result of a survey.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
I should have asked probably how many of you had a chance to do this. So if you have not yet, please copy the link here at the bottom of the slide. I invite you to try this out. Again, there are I think there's 14 different categories, and it is just really fascinating to get to some of those insights about oneself. I do one every once in a while, just because they keep adding things to that based on what's currently in conversation. So it's always worth a visit, and again, always cool insights.
So there's a couple of other insights, Petra, if you'd like to share them. So another one in the chat is from Sandra, and she said, I did show a favor for Europeans versus African Americans. Didn't feel like the instrument gave me a choice, so curious about that. And then Leanne had a comment about age, and it sounds like she had a positive association with youth. And of course, you guys can jump in. I don't need to be your voices. So I apologize for that.
So just real quick to the first one, these tests, that's why they're called implicit association. The way you choose your answers fast, and this is all also about a quick, again, how do we quickly respond? What's our impulse? What's our reaction? And so these tests, without us really realizing this, they really show what we most frequently lean into without us really choosing consciously, right? And that's why this is so revealing at the end of it. So again, if there's a preference that comes out for you that really doesn't make sense to you, that it's something within you that's a personal preference that we're not really aware of, but that preference again really informs some of the decisions we make, and we sometimes really don't really know how we arrive at these decisions, but they are informed by these kinds of little implicit associations that we carry with us. So yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say that, you know, this ageism is so embedded in our society, and it's, you know, it's obviously very illuminating to take this type of test to just check yourself, because I always think that I have a preference for older people. I'm, you know, getting older, and I, you know, hang out with a lot of older people. And so this test was interesting, but I think it's unfair in some ways, because our society just, you know, promotes youth, and that's what we see every day. And I guess it's just, maybe that's the thing, is that we have to challenge ourselves every day with what we're based on, what we're being fed through social media, et cetera, and then the actual, you know, the reality of our lives.
I really appreciate you bringing this up. So yeah, we all live in the world we live in, and we are certainly exposed to what we're exposed to, you know, from a marketing standpoint, most definitely. And then just thinking about social media, which is why I kind of added this little image here on the slide. So we consciously actually look oftentimes for things that support our opinions rather than looking for, you know, diversity of thought. And the same happens to us, you know, being exposed to the daily conversations, be it in the political landscape or be it in the economic conversations or anywhere else, professionally and personally. So yes, we have a strong impact, and we feel that, right, from what we're exposed to. And yes, to your point, Leanne, it is definitely advisable and recommendable to make a conscious practice of really thinking and reflecting on the information we're taking in, and consciously seeking out things that may actually come from an opposing direction, just to kind of get a little bit more of that in the middle or golden middle.
Linked with what Leanne just said, because one of my experiences was so as a gay man, I figured when I did that one, I was going to be heavily on the gay side, and I had this preference for straight or heterosexuality. I'm thinking, what? You know, because again, we're in a society that is dominated by one thing versus another, whether it's race, culture, religion, or sexual orientation, and that influences, I think, us in this implicit test. So Leanne, what you said just resonated with me as well, because I was thinking, wait a second, this should have come out on this other side. But again, it's all that societal influence that comes into this, I think, this test and our perspectives on things. Also, Ann Kelly had a comment here.
Yeah.
Both of mine, gender, career, and disability able-bodied, were labeled mid-range with no clear preference either way. I thought that was a good thing. I wonder how good, bad we are at taking tests affects my, in this case, desired results. And then she said, thanks. So
that's awesome. Yeah, and super interesting. I would say it shows that there is not a strong preference, perhaps, right? I mean, there's obviously not a default reaction that swings constantly to one side. What that actually means, I'm not the expert on that particular instrument. So this is something I would actually go back to the website and see if there have been some questions to that effect, and they may have been answered, because this has been going on for quite a while, and I'm sure this has happened before. So maybe something to explore a little bit further on the actual Harvard website. But what it certainly shows is that there is not a strong, default reaction towards one side of the equation, which certainly is a positive. What I would like to just say here in wrapping up on this particular exercise is, as coaches, we want to make sure that we do reflect on, some of the biases that we're bringing into the room in a session. And again, these kinds of tests are helpful for us to bring some of that to light. And then when do these things show up for me, right? So when do they happen? When do I get triggered? And how do I sit across from someone whose biases are in conflict or unstated, right? So again, when we sense that there's someone on a totally different end of the goalpost with something, how do we really sit and keep that space open and explorative, and not have that drive, right, and steer where we feel is the higher ground on this topic. So definitely something to explore on your own here as a takeaway. Again, what do I bring into the room? And again, if you haven't had a chance yet, use some of these tests to get specific on something that you're curious about. You can choose this by topic, and then really go through the scenario a little bit with yourself. How do I do this when the person in front of me is really in conflict here with where I feel like I land on this issue? Wanted to show you next something also very interesting. This actually recently came up in another context. So whoever joined us for visuals in coaching and coaching with visuals and stories may have come across this exercise. This was actually something that was published in the New York Times a little while back. And it goes into you know, what kinds of prototypes we're working with. And in this particular case, it was really, you know, when we see an individual, we ask, do they fit that? And in this particular case, the question was, what does a leader look like? And interestingly enough, when you look at these three examples here that really represent the outcome of this particular experiment, and this was done with I think over 1,500 individuals included in this control group. Leaders with big ears, all the right stuff, right? We're listening, we're great listeners, we got a big heart, we hold our team together, we think outside the box, all the good attributes. But when you really look at it, they're all men. So the reason I'm bringing this up here is what we need to really see here is the truth. You know, about women becoming more leaders is we need to see more women in leadership roles, right? We have to have a different story, a different visual to really make a change here on our end of the equation, right? As long as we think of leaders as men, you know, we almost really reflect the reality that we have outside, right? So what I also want to inspire you with at this point is, given this result here, which I thought was just hilarious in some ways, remember that change that you want to lead, right? Take that change and really let that come from you. Inspire that, right? And really lead with that and go, yeah, man, I really, when I think about leadership, how do I train myself to see more women in that role, right? In this particular example here, if we want to use that. Any questions? If not, I'm gonna move us along here a little bit, staying on the bias conversation here, because I think this is a very important one, and something again for you to reflect on a little bit even after today's session here together. The interface that you see here in orange on this slide is what I call that overvalued. And that's really what you see, right? So when we talk about biases that prevent us from applying our intelligence, or in some cases contort our intelligence into what you could call a weapon against the truth, we usually come up against the two usual suspects. One is the confirmation bias, which is seeing what we expect to see. And then the other one is the desirability bias, or seeing what we want to see. And as a result, we find reasons to preach our beliefs more deeply. I'm sure you know what that sounds like. We negotiate or follow through with our case more passionately, or simply ride on that, you could call it a giant wave of our political party, for example. I'm no pun intended, today's election day. But the tragedy is that we're usually unaware of the resulting flaws in our thinking and our subsequent decisions. So I'm gonna go through this slide with you guys, just which one of these resonate with you. And I'm gonna add another one to the picture, which is really my favorite. That's the I'm not biased bias. And the I'm not biased bias is in which people believe they're more objective than others. And I hope that for all of you who actually took the time to take one or two of those tests, it became clear that we all have unconscious bias, and they almost ensure that we and the companies we work for or the teams we work with face trouble unless we A, know about them, and of course, B, learn how to correct them before they sabotage us. So today is about really understanding and acknowledging all of this potential harmful stuff that goes on in our brains that help us create, often without our knowledge or consent, environments we really don't want, or alienate people we do want, and fail when trying to figure out who is to blame for these results we neither desire or understand. And what I encourage everyone to consider, especially if you're even remotely tempted to think I'm not part of the problem, which is, we often do that, I'm not part of the problem. Think about it this way: not being part of the problem is the same as is not the same as being part of the solution. I'm going to say this again: not being part of the problem is not the same as being part of the solution. So to anyone who has been harmed by the presence of harmful bias, it's cold comfort. I can definitely say you probably can relate to this, right? When you hear from a good person, like most of us consider ourselves to be, that you'd never consciously do anything to hold anyone back, because your unconscious, unchecked bias often does that for you. And again, it's about really recognizing that we all have these kinds of lived experiences that tend us to lean into things a certain way, that we are not aware of it, and that we need to really continuously work, A, to get more insight about it, to really actively seek more feedback from people, and to really create and build more self-awareness that will hopefully then have us contribute to the problem in a much smaller way. So we are all in this together, meaning we all contribute to this in smaller or lesser extents. Important is that we acknowledge that, and that we develop more self-awareness around what they are and when they show up, to counteract and make better decisions. Any questions to this? I'm moving, and I keep moving, Michael, unless you stop me with a question. I think we can agree that most of us would benefit from being more open more of the time. And this is another thing of really, you know, this kind of what we talk about, actively open-minded or open mindset. So mindset is a big word here. And when I talk about mindset, I'm almost going into what we can consider a scientist mode. And a scientist mode is when we lead with questions and curiosity instead of answers and solutions. And the answers and solutions are what pressure us sometimes to step on the gas and move through a situation, and not allowing ourselves or the other person really the time to reflect. So when we're thinking like a scientist, that involves more than just reacting with an open mind. It means being actively open-minded. It requires searching for reasons why we might be wrong, not for reasons why we must be right. And again, I want to say this again, because I think this is a very important thought that we should play with more often, right? It's not to find reasons why we must be right. but finding more reasons or have a network of people that challenge you more often on why you may not be right or why you might be wrong, if we want to use right and wrong here. So revising our views based on what we learn is basically what this is gearing towards, and recognizing with what you call intellectual humility, what we should all have a long list of areas where we're pretty much clueless or ignorant. And again, even going through this presentation, I'm sure there are some areas that pop up and we go like, we could really learn a little bit more about this or learn a little bit more about that. And that's what I mean when we become more curious about information we are missing or might be missing. In any conversation that we step into where we realize there's a lot here that I don't know, instead of brushing over that and acting like you're having someone in front of you that has no color or has no difference to you, get curious about it and really open up the conversation so that this person can actually share that with you. There's nothing worse than coaching someone in a position and not taking into consideration what their actual cultural context is in this particular role. But sometimes we sit in front of it in a leadership coaching session and we brush over that because we feel like, let's stick to the leadership program because that's safer than getting into this person's background. So catch yourself in these moments and really dig into some areas that you realize when you're in a session with someone like that, for example, what is it that I don't know? And what could I learn from this person actually helping me to understand better? Don't step in having this idea of you having to have all the answers and the solutions, right? And we do that oftentimes. We're trying to rescue, again, the coachee, and we're trying to rescue ourselves sometimes. But what this really boils down to is we're not learning. We're not learning in that situation, right? And that's really what this should always be. It's a partnership that's really offered learning on both ends of the equation. Any questions to this? Otherwise, I'm gonna just keep moving along. Wanted to just again take a little bit further that idea of scientific thinking, which favors humility over pride or doubt over certainty. So I've created here in my little sketch, just to sum this all up again, the rethinking cycle, which really gets us into the curiosity and the discovery, versus the overconfidence cycle that really gets us into the not being biased, and then the validation seeking, right? So take a look at this real quick so we can all make significant personal improvements if we can commit to becoming a better scientist of our own behavior and be willing to talk openly about the things we are learning about ourselves when in scientist mode. And again, the scientist mode is, again, looking for reasons why we might not be right, rather than looking for proof why we must be right. Also encourage people around us to explain their thinking when we have reason to believe that bias was present in their decision making. So this is a tough one because we're not usually comfortable doing that, but I encourage you to give this a try and do it in an open-minded, in a non-offensive way, right? Do it with curiosity and just, again, make it so that it's really coming from a place of trying to get some help in understanding what was just offered to you, what was just said, what was just commented, and really have that person explain to you where they're coming from to better understand what informed maybe their decision or their commenting. So again, what's also very important here at this very moment is that we always want to come from a place of learning and not judging, right? Because we also have, and this is something to acknowledge at this juncture here too, we've all developed a very high sensitivity to hear things we disagree with. And the minute we hear something we passionately disagree with, we really don't have a lot of bandwidth left to focus in on the few things that we could potentially agree on and build a mutual constructive conversation based on that, right? And even if that's only 10% of what you just heard and the other 90% were completely off the mark, try to really get back to what was some common ground here. What were some things that I could actually build on here and make this a constructive conversation rather than a judgmental one? And I see a hand up here. Lucy, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm looking at the rethinking cycle and the curiosity, and I'm becoming more and more aware how not just not asking questions, but even questions are very leading and could be even triggering our questions, the way how we ask or what kind of question. So I'm wondering, would you have any recommendation? What would make a question safer? Let's say when the person is really, when our client has a bias. I think first we need to check with ourselves how we are feeling, whatever they're sharing. What would be a way to gently and provide a safe space not to trigger shame or judgment in them?
It's really, you know, we already, again, and this is subconscious, right? We already lean in with our body language, with our facial expression. We already lean in a certain way when we get triggered, right, by something we really don't agree with. So a great way to practice this is actually really with a mirror, because we sometimes need to see ourselves, right? Are we still coming across open? Do we still open the door for someone to really honestly share with us? Or are we already kind of like in a sarcastic, little bit of a rhetoric way, joining the conversation and asking a question that we're actually already sounding like we're having the answer to? So it's a lot of it is really, how do we show up in this moment? How do we regulate, right? What we know is coming up for us. And that's a matter of practice. That will not happen first try, right? And it will not happen the second and third try. We'll just get better at it because we do it more often. And there's nothing wrong with saying, you know, I'm just curious, this is a new situation for me. Would you help me understand a little better what that experience was that got you to believe this, or that got you to come to this conclusion? Stay neutral in your language, right? Try to not pepper things with words that could already be suggesting that you have a preference when you ask. But also notice a little bit, am I having a smirk in my face because I think this was a totally stupid comment? Or am I actually still, you know, kind of neutral, or try to keep myself neutral and composed, and just really reminding myself, stay open to what you're about to hear, rather than waiting to hear something that further leans us into, I knew this was not, you know, I knew this was not right. Because again, it's the learning that we're trying to open the door to, right? And the learning doesn't happen when we're in the conversation and already have a closed mind. And this is so important for us as coaches, because we're working on keeping people's mind open, right, to learning and to continuously developing and to really evolve. And our mind sometimes is set in stone, right? So we have to really be careful what we're trying to role model. We gotta get better and better at it, right? And that's really where we lead. And that's something is really something we have to hone in through practice. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is the two sides, listening really, even when we feel that the client has a bias or filter, checking with ourselves and getting ourselves into like a peaceful state to check our own bias at that moment, and make sure that we come from a peaceful, open state anytime we try to address anything with the client.
And also very important here, because of some conversations that really get into the landscape, like I mentioned, it may be political, it may be economic, it may be, you know, around where we're going with our economy right now. We got to make sure that the sources of our conversation, this is that scientific thinking I'm bringing up here again, right? Make sure that we're sticking to sources that are actually factual. as long as we operate with sources that give us interpretations, we will end up with something that's already colored in our preference and favor, right? And that was that slide earlier where someone hits the Google result that's already confirming what they think is right here. So we got to be careful with any of these things that we get really solid fact-based information and allow these to be different from maybe a conclusion we've drawn previously on this topic. And that is definitely the case when we think about conflict right now, when we think about a lot of the crises that we're facing in the world, right? The amount of news and the amount of information that's floating around out there, a lot of that is actually an interpretation and not necessarily a raw source of fact and data.
Petra, we have about 5 minutes, and there is I just want to bring one question, and then we have about 5 minutes remaining.
Yes.
The question is from Anne, and she asks, Petra, of the variety of acronyms, how does one decide between DEI, DEIJ, DEIJB, and I, etc.? Thank you for great discussion.
Please repeat the question.
Yeah, it's how do you decide between the variety of acronyms, DEI, DEIJ, DEIJBI, so on and so forth?
So the original, obviously, acronym was DEI, which was diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then belonging was added, I think, in 2020. And then shortly thereafter, also the J was added for justice for obvious reasons. We had a lot of observed injustice in the news at the time. And there was a lot of conversation, particularly in organizations that started to flare up that really needed to be addressed. So for the purpose of our learning here today, I've kind of came back to DEIB, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And that is probably kind of where we're headed with the chapter level initiative. I do encourage, though, to be mindful that conversations around perceived injustice or justice in general will continue to pop up. So they will be continually coming into the space. And it's always helpful, again, to really be in the know about where the conversation is currently, and to be open to, again, some fact and research-based sources on topics, and get a little bit of a context and get a little bit of a homework done around certain things. But in the space of where we are here with our conversation today, I actually eliminated justice for that reason. It's going to get more complex with it, and it's specific scenarios that will be covered with the justice piece of this conversation. Does that make sense?
I think you got it. So Petra, as you're, oh, we got a thumbs up from one, so awesome, and a thank you from Anne. So that was her question. Excellent. Yeah, so give us how are you going to land this jet for us today?
So I had initially a little bit of an opportunity here for us to get into a smaller group conversations. Michael, I'm not sure what our timing is.
Yeah,
I would say this could otherwise be something to discuss, you know, in your own time, maybe in a smaller peer group. And it's really about how do we understand and regulate our emotions, right? And again, here is the systemic injustice again that we had come up. We have these topics in specifically for the coaches here today that work in organizations and organizational initiatives. You will have that continue to be a topic, be it with respect to career path and advancement in organizations, be it with you know, the pay gap that we still experience, men versus women, be it with regards to any underrepresented minorities in organizations. So it's important that we first of all are aware of what we bring into the room, and armed with that information, learn how to regulate, to stay neutral, and really create space for people to come and be vulnerable, which is what we're looking for, right? Which is when the armor goes down and we're getting to some of those really felt emotions and reflections that people have about where they're coming from when they hear certain things, when they get triggered about certain things. And that's what we're essentially helping them to overcome. So to peel that back is key for us to really do our best work. And then, of course, what is our role as coaches? To help clients foster empathy, vulnerability, and inclusion on their end, right? So again, it's the role modeling that we're doing, showing, right, how do you better step into a conversation that creates a safe stage and a safe place to have these really important conversations about where we're coming from when it comes to these topics.
Fantastic.
I want to also.
I want to also, you know, give here a moment. And this is what I said before, we have to almost use a mirror, right? We have to sometimes really get real about who we are and who, you know, who are we when it comes to some of this? What have I learned about my biases, especially after doing some of these tests, for example, that can help me spot them, right? When they come on and help me be ready to counteract some of that stuff that pops up for me. What would I need to do to continue to build my skill and confidence in identifying the impact of bias on my behavior and the behavior of others? And a lot of it is really the courage to identify this and the courage to also speak up, get curious when you see situations that suggest that there's bias present or there's something just quite off in the way this person responds to something. Have the courage to get curious and ask, right? Sometimes that's that first step in helping that person to reflect. What conversation might I need to have and with whom about how this has affected me or my organization in the past, and what can we learn from it? This is another big one in terms of who have I not talked to so far that could really help bring some information into the conversation that I otherwise don't have, a perspective that I otherwise don't hear. So we have to sometimes actively really seek out conversational partners that may not be the people that we normally tend to go like, oh yeah, we two just think alike, so this is going to be a great conversation. No, that's not where we learn most, right? Where we learn most is by inviting people into a conversation where we have that either that experience from the past that, you know, this person is maybe on a different page here with some of their thinking, and really practice how do we hear more about that and learn more where that person's coming from. And again, build a constructive conversation, maybe on 10% we can agree on in that first moment, right? So I'm going to leave you with just this thought, which I love. And this is from Paul Santagata. He's the head of industry and retail at Google. And something we always remind ourselves of, which is there's a lot that we see different that is actually not so different. And what I love about his summary here is really, this person has beliefs, perspectives, and opinions just like me. This person has hopes, anxieties, and vulnerabilities just like me. This person has friends, family, and perhaps children who love them just like me. This person wants to feel respected, appreciated, and competent just like me. And this person wishes for peace, joy, and happiness just like me. So we have actually a lot of common ground that we can build up from if we acknowledge sometimes more our common ground rather than, you know, our perceived differences that we immediately dig into, particularly when we get uncomfortable. And with that, Michael, I give it back to you. I have some resources here for everyone that we are happy to send out if you like to dig into this a little further.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Petra, so much. So many gems, I'm sure. And even as we're wrapping up here, if you would like to just put a real standout moment or statement or comment into the chat just for Petra to get some feedback and the chapter, that would be fantastic. What I'd like to do just briefly is in the chat, I just placed the link to our website. Daryl will share about the upcoming events in just a moment for especially around the DEIB topic throughout November. And I would just like to let you know as the president-elect, and I'm looking forward to 2023. If any of you are interested in learning more about volunteerism at the chapter level, whether it's a board position or a team level position, I would just love for you to reach out to me directly. I'm going to place my email into the chat as well as my cell phone number. And please reach out to me as we're starting to plan for 2023. Love to hear your ideas, your thoughts, maybe in ways that you are considering being involved, or if you just want to learn more about what it means to be involved at the chapter level in the leadership role or in the support role of the board and leadership, that would be fantastic. So that's there. And thank you for the endorsement, Lori, about volunteering being wonderful. I appreciate that. And Daryl, let's turn it over to you. Share what's coming up, and we would love to.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And thank you, Petra. This was wonderful. I want to echo what Michael said and others have said in the chat room about this presentation today. It's a great way really to, again, launch and kick off this DEI conversation that we're looking at this month and going forward into 2023 and even beyond. And as a reminder, we do have a couple more events this month that specifically address DEI issues. Next Tuesday, we have a topic on neurodivergence with Bruce Hostetter, and that's next Tuesday, November 15th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. I want to be mindful of that time for those who are Zooming in from other time zones, and that is next Tuesday. And next Thursday, we have a special presentation on embracing diversity in your coaching with Patricia Patty Ann Lee, who actually I think has joined us today in this session for a bit. And so that is next Thursday at 6 p.m. again Pacific time, and just be mindful of that. And those links are in the chapter as website that Michael posted a few moments ago, and as well as the emails that come through from the chapter. But again, this is a great way to think about how DEI influences and affects all of us in our coaching. And thank you again, Petra, for this great presentation. And I want to encourage you also on that assessment that she had from Harvard. Make sure if you get a chance to do that. Even I like what you say, Petra, that you check in maybe every now and then and go back to that to see how we've grown in our own perspectives of this topic. So again, thank you for being here today to all of you. And it was a great presentation. And I bid you all a great day, great week, and go out there and just embrace the diversity that this world has for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. Couldn't be more thrilled about this team I have here. Thank you all for your support today, and I hope everyone enjoyed it and had some good takeaways. Please feel free to circle back with any questions, and again, be happy to send out a handout for the resources upon request.
Those were requested, Petra. Yeah. If we can send those out with our follow-up, that would be fantastic. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful session.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.
All right.
Should we stop the recording?
Yes.
Yep.
Do that. You're correct.